get banned. The spike in electricity prices, the ABS said, this is a direct quote from the Bureau, primarily relate to state government rebates being used up by households, as well as the timing of the rollout of the Commonwealth Energy Bill Relief Fund rebates, which raises then an interesting question for our next guest, Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Treasurer and Deputy Liberal Leader federally. Ted O'Brien, good morning to you. Does this, in your view, make the case for an extension of the power bill rebates?
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Will. And I share your sentiments, by the way. This is tragic news. When it comes to electricity, though, I've got a real concern that the rebates that have been issued by the government to date, on one hand, have really helped households. So that's good, tick. The problem is, though, it has led to complacency on the part of the government to not fix the electricity system. And that's a bad thing, because you can't just keep papering over a broken electricity grid because you're giving away taxpayer money back to taxpayers. So the priority has to be to fix the problem at its source, and that is a failed energy policy on the part of the Albanese government. That's got to be the real focus. If the government wants to bring forward a proposal for other areas of assistance, certainly the Coalition will do what we usually do. We'll engage constructively and sort of we'll deal with it if it's in front of us. So, but I won't preempt where we might go.
Aren't the problem? I know it's difficult for you guys when you're the opposition, Ted O'Brien, because if the government's going to give away free money to poorer people and to middle Australians to help them pay their power bills, tactically it's not very shrewd to come out and say we don't support that. But isn't the problem, realistically and logically, that these measures, the sort of sugar hit pre-election sort of, we're going to take $500 off your power bill and everyone wins a set of steak knives, that approach is sort of, it's bad for inflation twice, isn't it? Because it's billions of dollars in public spending that fails to fix the underlying problem, meaning when this cosmetic rebate is removed, suddenly we've got inflation figures like the ones we saw yesterday showing that power prices haven't changed despite the illusion of a rebate, and now we're all going to pay more for our house.
Yeah, and this goes to the comments I was making before. It's fair enough to provide relief at a time when people are really struggling if concurrently, at the same time, you fix the problem that's causing it. But the government hasn't done that. And I have zero confidence that the Albanese government will do that because it's doubling down on an energy policy which is failing. But you're right too. So to give you an indication of how everyday taxpayers are paying for this anyway, if you compare the average taxpayer, how much they pay in personal income tax this year, they're forking out an extra $5,000 compared to only 3.5 years ago when the Coalition was in. So, you know what, we're 28 days from Christmas. Can you imagine what you could do with another $5,000 in your pocket?
Yeah.
So the government's taking more money from you, and then it takes a little bit of that, and then it puts it in your front pocket and says, there's a subsidy, aren't we good guys? And so really, the Australian taxpayer still loses out. The Australian household still loses out as the government just tries to funnel money around. And this is one of the big problems that we're trying to hold the Albanese government to account for. They're taking more money off Australian families. They're not fixing the big problems that are driving prices up. And ultimately, Australians are left poorer.
To David's original question, though, Ted O'Brien, we are captured by the political moment when it comes to fighting the inflation fight. And for this term of government, it seems it's been sort of cast entirely as the Reserve Bank's responsibility when there is a fiscal policy component of this. However, that requires politically unpopular things like either A, cutting expenditure, or B, raising taxes. Can you, from opposition, have lead a more mature conversation in this country about how we can tackle something like inflation from the government side of things?
Yes, and you're right, and that's exactly what we are now doing, because it can't keep going the way it's going now. So I made a speech yesterday at the Press Club in Canberra along these very lines. And one of the things that you see this government not do, that all previous governments have done, is introduce a set of rules in the budget that make sure that if you're going to go and spend more money, you've got to find offset somewhere else. You've got to, free money up. This government hasn't done that. And so that's why this government's spending probably more money than we've seen any government in about 40 years. And the more they pour money into the Australian economy, they compete with households, with businesses on the same goods and services that they want. And when that happens, prices go up. And so we are calling this out, but we're also coming forward with solutions. And what I laid out yesterday was the importance of the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, to introduce rules into his budget so that he can be held to account. And to date, he's refused to do so, but we are ramping that up, which is why I'm calling this inflation problem now Jimflation. It is inflation which should be owned by the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers.
Yeah, I got to say, it's a zippy little slogan, but I reckon that you guys have got to get your act together and really get back to your knitting on the economy and make that the thing, because, the texts we get from our listeners, a lot of them are just tearing their hair out. They feel like Albo, Chalmers, and our Bowen in particular are getting away without any scrutiny because you guys have been staring at your navels for too long. So a bit of getting your house in order might be handy, so we actually have an effective opposition in this country.
Well, can I say to you and your listeners, I hear you. We did release only about, 2 weeks ago, our affordable energy plan, and that provides an enormous amount of detail, which says there are two pathways here for Australia when it comes to energy. You get a Labor pathway, which is highly ideological, and prices are going to continue to go through the roof. You now have the details of a coalition policy, which has the ability to produce affordable energy. But you're right, we've got a long way to go, which is why I'm having a chat to you this morning, Dave and Will. This is what we need to do. We need to continue to engage. We are proactively coming up with our own policy solutions. We're doing that on the economy. We're doing it on energy. But indeed, a long way to go.
Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Treasurer, thank you for joining us this morning.